Guys, welcome back to another tutorial. For this one, we are going to be building a full stack React and Django project. And for this particular video, I'm going to be capturing the authentication, setting up a beautiful UI, and handling two types of authentication: normal authentication, social authentication. Just in case you want to sign in or sign up using Google, we are going to implement that. And our backend is going to be Django, while our frontend is going to be Vite, which is a tool for building great front-end applications via React. This is what we are going to achieve at the end of this video, a very beautiful tech shop. And at the end of this series, this project is going to be delivered fully functioning, having a whole lot of products in it, having CAT also implemented in it. But for this particular tutorial today, we are going to capture the authentication process and also setting up the header and the nav sections. Without wasting your time, let me show you how this is working. Let's go to login and try to log in. Okay, you know what? Let's try to sign up first. So I'm going to just sign up with YouTube. Let's just use 123 as password register. So we have been able to register. Then if I want to log in, I can use the YouTube to log in. Okay, so now we have logged in. As you can see, this is showing logout button because we authenticated. If I want to access login or register, I will not be able to access that. So let me log out and let's try to also log in using our Gmail. Let's go to register with Google. Then we are going to be redirected to this page. Continue to take me here and select this. Then we'll click continue. Boom, we have been able to log in with our Gmail. That was quite simple. That's what we are going to be setting up. Without wasting your time, let me log out. Let me take you guys to the coding side where we will start setting up this project. Sit down and relax because this is going to be a very interesting tutorial that you will learn a lot. See you in the backside. Alright guys, welcome back. Without wasting your time, I want to explain some certain things before we start building the project. Like I said, the backend framework is Django, and for us to be able to succeed in using Django to power this project, there are some libraries we will need, and one of them is the Django OAuth. The Django OAuth library is a library we use to handle authentication, and it supports various authentication methods like email, social accounts, and because of that, that's why I use the library to handle our social account aspect of our project. Now, another library that we are going to be using is the Django CORS headers. For the Django CORS headers, it is a middleware library for handling cross-origin resource sharing in Django. Now, CORS is a very good security feature that restricts how resources on a web page can be requested from another domain. And the reason why I'm using this Django CORS headers is because it allows your Django application to accept requests from different domains, and it also control access when you configure how you want those domains to be used, and also restrict access to some certain endpoints. You can use CORS to be able to handle that. Another library that we are going to be using is the request library, which is a Python library for making HTTP requests. Now, because we are going to be doing some cross-origin sharing that will require us to connect our backend and our front end together, we'll be needing requests to be able to handle that. Request helps us to send data to different resources. It is also very simple to use, easy to understand, and it makes it easy to send HTTP requests and handle responses. Another library that we are going to be using is the cryptography, which is a library for performing encryption. And because we are going to be generating some JWT tokens, cryptography is going to be able to help us to handle that. For cryptography, we can use it to encrypt sensitive data to protect it from unauthorized access. Cryptography also helps in password hashing, which securely stores your password by hashing them. I think these are the only few libraries that we are going to be using to set up our backend. While for our front end, like I said, we are going to be using React, but I will be using Vite as the tool to build our project via React front-end framework. There are some other libraries or dependencies, as it's called in JavaScript, that we are going to be using with React to be able to build our project. One of them is the Authentication. Another one is the JWT decode. JWT means JSON Web Tokens. For the Authentication is a popular JavaScript library, which which is used for making HTTP requests from your web application to a server. It can also be used to fetch data, send data, and interact with APIs. Now, because our backend is going to be providing APIs, we'll need Azure in our front end to be able to connect those two endpoints together and have a data interaction process. Another library that we are going to be using is the JWT decode, which is a small library that allows you to decode JSON web tokens. JWTs are used for securely transmitting information between parties as a JSON object. With the help of JWT decode library, we'll be able to extract the payload data from the token. Another dependency that we are going to be using is the React Router DOM, which is a library for routing in React applications. Now, it allows you to navigate between different pages or views in your app without refreshing the page. So with the help of React Router DOM, we are going to be able to achieve that. These are the few libraries that we are going to be using to build our project. Now that I have explained all this for you guys to understand, it's time for us to start building. I have created a folder and opened up my CMD. The name of my folder is Tech Shop. The first thing I'm going to do is to create my virtual environment, and I usually use Python-m VMV. I'm going to call it Tech Shop EMV. So let's activate our virtual environment. Tech Shop EMV script/activate. First thing I'm going to do is to install Django. Pip install Django. Another library that I did not mention, I believe I skipped that because I have explained that in previous videos, is the Django REST framework, which is a framework for building APIs with Django. So we are going to be using that to build our APIs. Of course, we cannot really do anything without using that particular framework. So I'm going to install Django, then Django REST framework. Okay, so the next one we are going to install is the Django course headers and Django OAuth. So I have added both of them here. Hit enter. Okay, let me clear this so we can have space. The next one, let's install for Django REST framework, simple JWT. Okay, that's done installing. Clear this out. The last ones we are going to install is the request and the cryptography. Okay, now that we are done installing all these libraries, let's start setting up our project. And to set up our Django project, we'll do Django-admin, start project. Let's call it tech_shop. Okay, so we'll cd into tech_shop. Then we'll create our one and only app that we will need, which is the API app. So Django-admin start app API. Okay, so clear this out, then we'll open up our VS Code. Okay, so this is our full project here. For the front end, we are going to come back to that, but I just want to first of all build the back end before we start building the front end. The first thing we are going to do is to go to our settings.py. In our settings.py, there are some things we'll have to add. Close this up. The first thing I'm going to do here is come down. We'll first of all import time delta. I'm going to use that later on, so I will do date time. We'll import time delta. Now inside our installed apps here, the first thing I'm going to do is to add the app we installed, which is API. Then the next thing we are going to add is course headers. Then the next thing I'm going to add is our REST framework. Then we'll also add the OAuth library we installed. Next, we'll add the OAuth.account. Okay, the next one we'll add is the OAuth.social account. Then I will add the one for, we are only setting up for Google. You can do the rest for yourself. Just follow the process of what I do for Google to handle any other social application you want to add in your application. .providers, then .google. Let me add rest_framework.auth token. I have added API, course headers, REST framework, OAuth, OAuth.account, OAuth.social account, then OAuth.social account.provider. Okay, so for this middleware, we have to also register for the OAuth middleware and for the course headers that we added. After the middleware.session middleware, I'm going to add the one for course headers here. I will do course headers.middleware.course middleware, just like that. I missed a here, correct that. Next thing I'm going to do below here, we'll add the one for auth.account.middleware, just like that. Then account middleware. Okay, so this settings is up. Remove one of these. This should be 1A auth.account.middleware. You see, I wrote command here instead of dot. auth.account.middleware.account middleware. The next setup I'm going to do here is to set up our course. Okay, let me first of all set up the one for our REST framework default authentication classes. Set REST underscore framework, I will say equals to default authentication, then underscore classes. Inside here, what I'm going to do, I will first of all set the one for REST underscore framework, then underscore simple JWT, then dot authentication dot. But instead of using just dot authentication, it should be JWT, then authentication. Simple JWT dot authentication dot JWT authentication. Put comma. Can even put comma here if you want to add more. Then come down below. I will add the one for our default permission classes. Default permissions classes. Let this one be a list, and inside here I will set this. Nope, this is wrong. Remove that and add permissions here. Then dot is authenticated. This is good to go. Default authentication underscore classes, then REST framework. Just making sure there's no error before we continue. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to now do is to set up our settings for our simple JWT. And for this one, I'm going to set for our access token lifetime. So when you're working with APIs, the authentication process requires you to generate tokens, and the tokens is what your front end interacts with your backend to have access to some certain permissions that it is granted based on whatever token the person has generated. So there is the one that handles for refresh tokens, while there is the one that handles for access. With the access token, we can be able to generate the refresh token. So I'm going to set up those two tokens, their lifetime. Normally the access tokens is not meant to last more than 30 minutes, whereas the refresh token is the one that you will keep on refreshing your tab on. You can keep that one for maybe 2 days or 3 days, depending on how long you want a user to have access to your application when logged in. For this simple JWT, I'm going to set the access token lifetime and also the refresh token lifetime. So the first one I'm going to set here is the access token underscore lifetime. For this one, this is the reason why I imported the time zone. So I will set time delta. No changes to the minutes, and I will set it to be 30, comma, set the one for refresh token lifetime, but instead of minutes here, I'll set it to be 3 days. For the purpose of this tutorial, I'm just going to set for 3 days. Next thing I'm going to set is for our course headers origins allow underscore allow all. I'm going to set this to be equals to true. Then I will set the course allow credentials, allows credentials. Write the course properly this way. Set this to also be equals to true. Thereafter, I will set for my authentication backend. Nope. For this one, I'm going to set for Django.contrib.auth backends, then .model backend, then comma. I will also add the one for OAuth.backends. Nope, this is wrong. Let's just delete everything. Do OAuth, then .account, .auth, .backends, instead of model backend, this one should be authentication backend, just like this. Okay, but instead of making this to be a dit, let me use dictionary. Sorry, let's use tuple. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to set now is for my login and logout URL. I just want to set everything for my settings so that we'll just focus on building the API and also setting up the endpoints before we move over to the front end. This one is going to be login underscore redirect underscore URL. I'm going to set this to be equals to callback. Later on, we're going to create this endpoint. Then I will also set the one for logout, but I don't need it. I can just leave it because the logout is going to be handled by the front end. So we don't need to set the logout redirect URL. Then the next thing I'm going to set now is the social account provider settings for Google. Social account provider settings. but I'm not going to add settings there. Inside here, first we'll add Google. First of all, we'll add scope. For the scope, I'm going to add email. Let's add email then. Nope, not password, comma, then profile. The next key I'm going to add is the auth parameters. And for this one, I'm going to set it to be access underscore type, set it to be online, close this up, put another comma. Then another key we are going to set is the one for OAuth PCE, then enabled. I'll set this one to be equals to true. The last but not the least, I'm going to set the one for fetch underscore user info. Set this one to be true as well. For the OAuth token, client and the secret, I'm going to add that in my admin. OAuth makes it possible as long as we run migrations and all these applications we have set up for the OAuth gets installed, we can add that directly in our admin. And I feel like that's better. Instead of declaring it here specifically, adding it there is the best approach, and that's what we're going to do. So the last thing I'm going to add here, which is very important, is the social account store tokens, which will make it possible to be able to store tokens, generate tokens for a user whenever they log in using a social account. So this settings is very, very important, because if you don't set it, you're going to have a situation whereby you will not be able to store tokens, and without tokens you cannot prove your authentication in your front end. So I will set this to be social account store underscore tokens. I'm going to set this to be equals to true. My settings here is correct. I just hope there's no oversight, because oversight can cause you a whole lot of damage and waste of time. But let me quickly cross check and make sure everything is fine. For the authentication backends, let's see. Django dot, yeah, you see there's a mistake here. It's not contrib, it's contrib. Then dot auth dot backend, then dot model backend. Or auth dot account dot auth. Okay, so for this one should not be dot, it should be underscore. Auth underscore backends, then dot authentication backend. Okay, then cause allows credentials equal to true. Then set our simple JWT. Okay, everything looks good here. So I'm going to open up my terminal here, activate our virtual environment. I think the name is tech shop env. Okay, let's open up this and see. Okay, so what I'm meant to do is to come here to then do scripts, then slash activate, clear this out, then cd into tech shop. So the first thing we are going to do is to manage.py, then we'll make migrations, which will show us no migrations needed. I just like to do that for doing sake. Then let's go ahead and migrate. Okay, so our migration is done. I feel like everything in our settings.py is done. So I'm just going to still leave it open. The next thing we are going to do is to come to our app here. In our app, I will create a serializers.py. Okay, close down this. Then let me zoom this a little. Okay, this is too big, but this way it can even work so that you guys can see everything that I'm writing down. In my tutorial where I was teaching how to build APIs in Django REST framework, I explained what serializer is, and I said serializers is used to convert our Django models to readable formats that our front end will understand, which is usually JSON format. That's the purpose of the serializer. Now, to set up the serializer, I will import from Django, then .contrib. Yeah, .auth.models will import the default user model. We don't need to set up any table. We'll import from REST underscore framework, then we'll import serializers. That's all. So we'll go ahead and set up our user serializer, call it user serializer. Okay, serializers.model serializer. Close this up, and inside it we'll set up the class meta, then model equal to user, and fields equals to ID. Then we'll just use username and password. It's just a simple authentication registration. Then we'll set the extra keywords that I'll set that to be password right. Let's do right only equals to true. Okay, Let's close this. Okay, now the next thing I'm going to set here is set a create function. In this create function, we'll have self, then validated. No, let's change it to validated data, and inside here we'll do user equals to user object dot create underscore user. Nope, what we should have here is the validated data, then I will return user. As simple as that. Let's save this up. Our serializer is done. Very simple serializer. Now let's open up our views. In our views, the first thing I'm going to do, I don't even need render, but there's a whole lot of other things we'll need to import. So I'm going to change this one. Instead of render, I will change it to redirect. Then I will also import from Django.contrib. We will do .auth models again, import user. Then from REST underscore framework, we will import our views. We'll use generics. Then I will import from serializers. We'll import the user serializer we just created. Then from REST underscore framework, we will, okay, before we even do import, I will do permissions. We will import allow any, then is authenticated. Okay, so what else do we need? Let's import from OAuth, then social token. Okay, let's do social account, not account dot models. We will import social token, then we'll also import social account from all other social account dot models. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to now import is Django.contrib, then .auth decorators. We will import the plugin required, and I will also import from REST framework, yeah, simple JWT. Then tokens, we will import refresh token, not token itself, we will import refresh token here. Then I'll also import from Django.contrib.auth, then we'll import get user model. Okay, let's also import JSON from Django.http, then we'll import JSON response. Then from Django.views.decorators.csrf, we'll import the csrf exempt. Lastly, I will import JSON. These are the packages we will need for our views to set up the views. So the first thing I'm going to do is to set user to be equals to user get model, initialize this function here, so that first I will create a class for our user create. So for the user create, I will set this to be generics dot create API view, and inside here we'll do query set equals to user.objects.all, then we'll do serializer class equals to user serializer, then emission classes, we'll set it to be allow any, which we imported somewhere here. Okay, now the next function I'm going to create, our class, is for us to use and retrieve user details. This one will be something we'll explore more when we start handling profile, but I just wanted to help me to retrieve user details that I can use to check on my front end if an authentication is successful. And to do that, I'm going to create another class, call it user detail. Let's call it user detail view, generics dot, nope, I'm not creating detail view. Let's use the retrieve update. Let's use retrieve update API view, and use your query.user and serializer. And last but not the least, but this one should be is, let's use is authenticated, that we imported somewhere here. Okay, so I will then do function to get our object, or instead of doing super.get objects, I'm gonna do return self.request then .user. Bring this up a little bit. Okay, this is done for our classes here. The first one is going to handle our user create, while this one is going to help us to retrieve user details. The next function I'm going to create is for our Google login callback. This function is going to help us to redirect back to our front end and help us to be able to authenticate us with the token that we are going to add inside the endpoint that will redirect back to our front end. So what I'm going to do here is, first of all, this function, you should not be able to access it unless you have been authenticated. Now for this, we'll first of all do Google underscore, let's call it login underscore callback. Request can do it, and inside this function I'm going to do user equals to request.user. The first thing I'm going to do here, let me bring this up a little bit, is to print all social account details of the user. The purpose why I want to even do this is so that we can use it to debug. So I'm going to do social account equals to social account.objects, but instead of all, I'm going to do filter, then set user equals to user. And I can do print so that we can see it, social account for user. Let me add the social accounts here. Yeah, so that we'll be able to check if our social account is being retrieved. So the first thing I'm going to do after I do this is to then check if the social account exists. And to be able to check that, I will then create another variable and call it social account. Remember, the first one is social account. I will do social account underscore account, not .pop. Then I will do .first. Inside here, I will initialize that function. I will first of all check if it is not social account. I want it to print no social account found. Okay, yeah, I can do for user. Close this print statement. What we are going to do, if it is not a social account, I'm going to return for Vite. I'm going to return the URL for my Vite. The normal URL for my Vite is likely to be localhost 5173 or so. For here, I'm going to add HTTP localhost. I think it's usually 5173. Then slash login slash callback, okay, slash error equals to no social account. Thereafter, we will go ahead and attempt to fetch the social token for the authenticated user. And to do that, I'm going to set token to be equals to token.objects. Instead of get, I'm going to use filter, and inside this one, I'm going to set it to be account equals to social account, not that token, just social account. Then account underscore providers. The one we are dealing with is Google. Bring this here so you can see that. Then I will do .first again. Okay, so further on, what I'm going to do is to then print the token or error message. To do that, I will do if token print for me refresh. Then I will set for the access underscore token to be equals to a string. Then I will put refresh dot access token. So mind you, all this information I'm setting here, we are going to be pulling them up from our front end. So you have to be extremely careful and make sure you set everything well so that you will not have oversight that might affect the way your front end is going to work. Thereafter, we'll return redirect. Here I'm going to set, because this particular endpoint or URL I'm setting here will carry the access token that we are going to return in our front end. So I need to set it using a formatted string. We can just pull this up, put it here. HTTP localhost, then / login callback. But for here, I'm going to add it to be access. Nope, this thing is giving me wrong information. Access token, then set it to be equals to access token. So go ahead and close this, and let me zoom this back a little so you guys can see. Yeah, so this way you guys can see it properly instead of it being that big. Okay, so what I'm going to do right here now that I've set this is that we have set our access token. Once all this is done, else I'm going to print no Google token found for user, set to user here, return redirect, login callback. But for this one, I'm going to set it to be, let's put question mark, error, and no Google token. Once we are done with this, our login callback, we can then set another function that will help us to validate the Google token that we are generating here whenever we are done. So make sure, like I said, everything you're doing here, you cross-check properly so you will not have mismatches that's going to affect the way the function is going to interact with your front end. Okay, like here now, I made a mistake. This is meant to be filter and I wrote that wrong. Let's create our validate. For this one, I'm going to set it to be at CSRF exempt. Set the function to be validate underscore Google token request again. And inside this function, I will first of all do if request dot method equals to post. We'll do try and accept. For the try, I will set data to be equals to json.load request dot body, not post. Close that. Then Google underscore access token. I will set this to be data.get access token. We can also print to make sure that we are getting it right. Let's just print the Google access token. The next thing is to do if not Google access token, return a JSON response. Inside the JSON response, I want to get detail. For the detail, I'll set access token is missing, comma, status to be 400. I want this status 400 to be returned. Thereafter, we'll return JSON response again. For this time, I'm going to set this to be valid, true. You don't need to set any status here. Normally, you can decide to set status if you want. For our except, I'm going to set another JSON decode error, but I'm not going to use as here. For this one, I'm going to return a JSON response. We'll still return detail. For inside this detail, I'm going to say invalid JSON, then set status to be 400. Close this. Return a JSON response valid. Nope, I have already returned valid. This one also another detail. Here it will carry method not allowed. Yeah, but instead of 400, I'm going to set this one to be 405. So this return is meant to be here for the main if request method. Okay, so cross check and make sure everything is fine. If request.method is equals to post, try data equal to JSON Google access token. Okay, then print if not Google. Okay, then we'll return a JSON. Thereafter, we'll return valid true except JSON. Okay, this looks good. The next thing I'm going to do is to create our endpoint. Normally, you can create the endpoint for this API as a separate URLs.py. You can do that for your own project. I will just go ahead with the project root URLs.py. Just add all the endpoints there. First, let's add include here. Then from API.views, we'll import all. From REST underscore framework underscore simple JWT.views, we will import the token obtain per view and the token refresh view. So that here below, I will add another part. First of all, let me add the one for our API slash user slash register. Okay, so that here, let me close this our endpoint first before comma. This one I'm going to add the user create dot as view and the name will be register. You can call it user create. Another endpoint is the one for our token, comma. For this one, we are going to use the token obtain per view as view, then token obtain. This one is going to help us to create a token for us. We are using the JWT, simple JWT. The next part I'm going to add is the one for our refresh as view as well. Close this. Now let's add the one for our REST framework URLs API. Remember, we are using REST framework. We can use it to even test this our API endpoints to make sure everything is working. For this one, I'm going to add auth, close this, comma. Then for here, we'll use include, and inside our include, we'll add the REST underscore framework dot URLs. You don't need to add name here. The next one, I'm going to add the one for our account. For this one, I'm going to add the path to be account, comma. Then this one is going to be include again. Inside the include, I will add the OAuth.URLs. Now let me add one for our callback, the Google login callback function we created. Callback, we'll bring the Google login callback. Is a function, then set the name to be equals to, you can call it callback instead of using Google login callback. Okay, the next one is the part for our API auth user. This one is to get the user detail. So I'm going to call it API slash auth slash user, close. Then we'll set it to be user detail view dot as view. Then name, we'll set it to be user underscore detail. Okay, let me see what I called it here. User detail view. Okay, that should be comma here. Close this one. Now the last one I'm going to add is the one for our validate token, and for this part I'm going to set it to be API then slash Google slash validate. I know sometimes it can, especially if you are in a learning phase, what I'm doing might sound tricky, but if you follow me and stick with what I'm doing, practice makes perfect. Everything will become clearer to you. Just follow me and do what I'm doing. Practice with what I have, everything will become clearer. This one is the one that's going to help us to validate our token, while this one is the one we can use to pull up our user details. Everything looks good. Save. Our backend is ready. We can try to run our server now. Clear this. Python manage py run server. You can try to test run some of all these things we have built. Okay, so there are some errors. Could not import REST framework underscore permissions that is authenticated for API setting default. Okay, so let's start dealing with the issues one after the other before we start building our front end. Let's go to our settings. Something might be wrong. Talking about these particular settings I'm importing here, the default authentication classes, and I'm doing REST underscore framework underscore simple JWT dot authentication dot JWT authentication. The problem is this is meant to be dot, not underscore. Save it. Let's come back. What is the next error we are having? No one will name because yeah, from this you can even know what the problem is. I think somewhere in this middleware is meant to be course headers, not just core. Save. Let's return back and see. Is there any other thing? Okay, so our server is running now. The errors has been fixed. And to test run what we have built, I'm going to use this one. Let's open up this one. Nothing is going to happen there, but let's still leave it. Let's open our local home and open this and see write only. Okay, so this is not opening because there's an error somewhere. Let's go to the serializers, the py. Yeah, this is meant to be right. You save it up. Let's go back and refresh this. Okay, so now we can see our endpoint for the user register is working. And if I want to test run this and make sure it's working, let me add Joshi as my username. Let's see if we can create this account. Post. Okay, so we have been able to create this account now. Now to be able to generate a token for this account, I'm going to collect this endpoint. Let's open this endpoint and see. Okay, we have opened this endpoint. So if I add this Joshi and put in my password post, you can see we have been able to have access to refresh token and also access token, meaning our refresh token and access token is working. If I also want to have access to this refresh token now, what I can do is open up another endpoint so we can validate that. It will ask me to put in the refresh token. So I'm going to just copy this refresh token we have here. Let's put it there and see post. You can see it has created an access token for us, meaning our endpoints are working. Good, good, good. So now we have been able to test our API and ensure it's working. Let's start building our front end to look like this. If you try this now, it's not going to work because we do not have any project there anymore.